Hello, dear friends. This is Kardec Radio at 11 p.m., nourishing our souls with Hail Christ. Hail Christ. Yes, this is a book we are studying and delighting ourselves with. By Emmanuel through Chico Xavier. Emmanuel is the spirit author of this book that is certainly transformative. The book Hail Christ comes after so many other books were written. Emmanuel, his first novel was 2,000 years ago, and then came after 2,000 years ago, 50 years later. It's his own story in a way, and the families that are connected to him, and his reincarnation 50 years later. After those two books, Emmanuel, through Chico Xavier, wrote to us 67 years ago. 67 years ago. Yes, this book was written, as we can see, in 1953. In this book, Hail Christ, Emmanuel doesn't bring solely the story of people who lived on earth and made history and extraordinary lives of people who went above and beyond the call of their duty. But also it tells us about how to live the Christ consciousness. As you know, in the preface of this book, Emmanuel says to us, may the example of these post-apostolic children of the gospel inspire in us today the simplicity and the toil, the trust and the love with which they renounce themselves in the service of the Divine Master. And he reminds us that though we are millennia away from the coming of the Christ to the earth, we're still being called to help. As he says here, Spiritism calls for brave souls to sacrifice themselves in order to spread it victoriously. It's calling you and I, but not to preach, to live. That's the hardest. Because to say it, it's easy. Anyone can come here and speak. But to live it, to sacrifice, as he says, ourselves, wow, that's another story. And the beauty of it all is when Emmanuel tells us that today, as in days gone by, Jesus overlooks our rebelliousness, our rebellious opinion, our onslaughts of opinion, our words, our sectarian fanaticism, and above all, the exalted benefactor expects from our lives our hearts, character, conduct, attitudes, examples, and ongoing personal service. The only means that can ensure the effectiveness of our cooperating with him in building the kingdom of God. That's the beauty of it all. Our Master Jesus is only expecting ourselves, the best of us. So we are going to start today the march of stories of people who lived in the 3rd century. After the first centuries past Jesus' coming, when Christianity is blossoming and yet still being persecuted, we're going to learn about people who may be pretty much like us. Emmanuel writes this book and he says not to romanticize or to make it fiction, but a brief page of sublime story of the pioneers of our faith to our companions in the Spiritist harvest. We want to win in life, right? When you come very close to death, you realize how important life is. When you come close to visualizing how things will change in a second in our lives, we feel like going back to our lives quickly and valuing more the things that we have, but especially what we can be. Most often we think we cannot be patient, we cannot be tolerant. Sometimes it's too much, but there will be a day in which we're gonna find it that the practicing of those virtues, tolerance, forgiveness, kindness, loving, kindness, gentleness, will be for us the only thing that we want to feel. You want to see how? Okay. Part 1 of this book. Join us today, Preparing Pathways. Do you remember when you reincarnated? No. Yes, we may not remember. How did it happen? Did you ever consider the people who may have participated in the making of this reincarnation for you? The people who love you so dearly, who planned it for you, who were dreaming about you reincarnating and making the right thing. Have you thought about this? Because often we think about the preparation for a reincarnation as if it is something that we're doing on ourselves, on our own. No, there are other spirits, and that's how this is the beginning of this book. Preparing Pathways. Nearly 200 years of Christianity had begun to change the landscape of the world. Think about this. Christianity changing the landscape of the world 200 years later. How so, right? They were still persecuted. What does Emmanuel mean by beginning this book with that statement? There are some books by Emmanuel. One is titled Emmanuel and the other is O Consolador, in which Emmanuel brings to us how the Christ consciousness promises to change the landscape of the world. And we're seeing this little by little, year after year, century after century, millennia after millennia. When we read the books 2,000 years ago, 50 years later, and now here Christ, we observe that before the coming of Jesus Christ, we were not contemplating fraternity. When we were the winners, we didn't care about how losers felt. When we were healthy, we didn't care about how people who were sick felt. When we were men, we didn't care about how women felt. When we were victorious in anything, famous, socially influent, we didn't care about the people who were not. On the contrary, we smashed them. We abused them. We enslaved them. This was the scenario before Jesus. Being sick was a punishment of the gods. And everybody was still in this cultivation, the worshipping of many gods. The Hebrew people were the only ones on earth who cultivated that certainty that there is only one God. And a God that would stimulate us to be at our best. When we knew we couldn't kill, we couldn't rob and steal, we couldn't do so many things, the 10 commandments given by Moses. And yet, it wasn't enough for many people to understand how that would be possible. There was a missing link. And then Jesus came. The divine Messiah, the promised Messiah, came to us to bring to us the key word, love. Yes, we shall not kill, but what do we do instead? Forgive. We shall not steal, so what do we do then? Share. We shall not take what is not ours, so what do we do then? So Jesus comes to complete what wasn't complete in people's hearts, the hopes that God is so loving, so paternal, so embracing, that there is room for everybody, and those who were strong have to help the weak ones. The victorious ones needed to be loving and kind to those who were not. Those who were healthy needed to help the sick. Those who were wealthy helped the sick. Jesus brought us the certainty of the laws of equality, of fraternity, solidarity, freedom, the worshiping of God as center stage, loving God above all things, and loving others as we love ourselves. Jesus restores the order, completes what wasn't complete. And how did he do it? By doing it himself. So, Emmanuel begins this chapter reminding us that when Jesus came to earth, in spite of the hardships of the Christians and the persecutions against them, the sacrifices that they were going through were changing the scenario of the earth. And it still does. He talks about the many Roman emperors, from Nero to the Antonines, who were persecuting the Christians, and the persecution was immense. Jesus had returned to the resplendent throne of wisdom and love, from which he rules over all humanity. But like a drowning swarm of bees of renewal, the continuers of his ministry among incarnates remained active in preparing the soil of people's hearts for the kingdom of God. Using the physical vestment, they offered their testimonies of faith and goodwill to help spread the good news for the redemption of the earth. Thus, now, he is going to tell us, in a spiritual city back in the beginning of the 3rd century, 2nd to the 3rd century, what was happening in a spiritual city. This is unique. It's a revelation like we've never received before. Okay? This is a revelation that tells us about how many advanced spirits existed back then. And I'll put a pause here. Go to the book Nosso Lar by André Luiz through Chico Xavier. In that book, we get to know that the colony Nosso Lar was founded in the 1600s in the spiritual realm. We're talking about a spiritual city that existed in the European region back in the 1st centuries of the modern era. Okay? He said, in a lovely spirit city adjacent to our planet's surface, we find a large gathering of souls attracted to the divine itinerary, listening to the exhortations of an enlightened guide who is speaking to them from his heart. This man is named Claudius, and he begins by telling this group of spirits who are in that spiritual city. Okay? Dear brothers and sisters, the gospel is a code of peace and happiness that we need to establish in our lives. Listen to this, friends. We're listening to this ancient and yet current voice of spirits who are more evolved than us and were more evolved than us back then, imagine nowadays, and they're still connected to the purposes of evolution of the earth. So, what an honor for us to listen to these words right here and now, especially at this time of transition on earth when we're being challenged to our deepest transformation, when our physical bodies are being transformed and are being used as vases of transformation for us, expunging things that we no longer need, preparing us for the new phase, letting go of the old so we can let in the new, letting go of the old, letting the new. And what is this new? I will begin. He says, dear brothers and sisters, the gospel is a code of peace and happiness that we need to establish in our lives. The sun that pours out its blessings on the world is part of nature. Christ is the spiritual sun of our destinies. I will repeat. Christ is the spiritual destiny, sun of our destinies. It is crucial that we willingly participate in these teachings and establish their essence in our daily lives. We mustn't forget that people's minds are stone-like, fast asleep in false conceptions in our daily lives of the heavenly life. How can there be divine intervention without human cooperation? Without the heroic selflessness of those who are devoted to the progress and evolution of souls, education will be nothing but empty words. Jesus, however, triumphed through sacrifice. The crucified Master is a divine challenge. Bound to human vicissitudes, Caesar governs the affairs of the flesh, which is on its way to renewal. Christ reigns over the imperishable soul, slowly sublimating it for eternal glory. You are right, Paulo Andrade. Powerful words. And that's why many people don't want to talk about Jesus nowadays. They want to talk about mediumship, spirituality. But when you talk about the Christ, they're like, please don't talk about it. Why? First, because certainly the people who have this kind of feelings in the past, they used Christianity for their own interest. They failed. They come in this life. They want to be far from it. Their aversion is not towards the Christ, but their aversion is towards themselves when they use the Christ. And that's why nowadays many people enter the pathway of spirituality and they don't want anything to do with the Christ. Other people, they don't want it because it's too much of a sacrifice. Because when we go through this Christ teaching, we're talking about exercising the best in us. The best. And some people are of the least effort. They don't want to push harder. So then they are saying, can we talk about something else? Can we talk about reincarnation? Can we talk about the spiritual realm. But you know, these moral things, that's why when Allan Kardec, he was bringing Spiritism, the books, the foundation. When he brought in 1864 the Gospel according to Spiritism, many people thought that's crazy. You're talking about spirits, reincarnation and things, and saying that this is all sacred, that there is a sense of the divine in it, and that when we talk to spirits, we need to watch out regarding our moral life, and that we can be better than this. Many people said, no, thank you. I want to talk to spirits, but I don't want this moral code. I want to talk about reincarnation, but please don't tell me I have to forgive and forget, because come on, how somebody's going to come and kill my whole family, and later I'm going to forgive. That's what we hear in mediumistic meetings every week. The obsessors refusing to give in to forgiveness, refusing themselves to feel that they need to forget, creating a chaos in their lives and people's lives without noticing that there's a law that they are playing with, and it's like playing with fire, the law of action and reaction. When I hear people say, but come on, I'm just drinking a glass of wine, let's not be rigid. I say, you know, you're not talking about rigidity, you're talking about the law of life. You're playing with things that are certain. Your body works in a certain way. It doesn't escape the laws that we need to observe to make health stay in place. Like nowadays, people are talking about the coronavirus and thinking, it's okay, I can do whatever I like and this coronavirus is not gonna catch me. And if it does, I'm gonna survive. As if we're playing childish games. We're talking about one law, the law of the mental field. The law of the mental field is only one. You attract what you emit. What are we attracting? Experiences that need to polish us? That's okay. But we cannot defy it. We cannot throw ourselves from a cliff and say, come on, I'm just playing with it. You're gonna die. So here they are saying, without the heroic selflessness of those who are devoted to the progress and evolution of souls, education will be nothing but empty words. Right now, friends, we don't have spiritist centers open. Do we miss it? We don't. Thank God we have the internet and we can be connected. But do we miss mingling with friends? Being there face to face, hugging. I miss it. I know you do too. Right? Being together, seeing how precious it is. But it takes a lot of work to make it happen. When everything resumes to its order, we need to be very extra careful in embracing these precious places where we're given much by many from the beyond, and a few, usually a few, who are on the behind the scenes sustaining it. We cannot take it for granted. Now we're feeling it on our very skin, what it is to have the doors shut. We feel it. We feel it. But he says, the crucified master is a divine challenge. It's not about words, it's about actions. Vanessa, but where's the story here? Okay, let's go back to the story then. They are in the spiritual realm. Claudius, as this illuminated spirit, is sharing these teachings. Who is this audience, huh? They are of people who wanted to be regenerated. He says, dear brothers and sisters, many of you left commitments of love behind, and you yearn to return to the difficult pathway of the flesh, like someone who braves the flames to save his loved ones. Even so, now that you have devoted yourselves to the divine truth, you have learned to put the Lord's plans above your own personal desires. You are weary of illusions, and so you consult reality and strive to magnify it, and reality has escaped your decision for its implementation in the world. But do not forget that collaborators in Christ's work only help without having expectations, and work without attachment to results. Pause. Who is the audience to which Claudio is talking, or with which he is talking? I would say, in other words, as we read in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 3, an audience of regenerated spirits. They no longer think of themselves first. They could be in other spheres. They already have the merit and the credit, but they are there preparing to reincarnate to help loved ones who stayed behind. They put their personal plans behind to follow the divine plans. All right. So, one first thing for us here. You and I, hopefully, are in this pathway, transitioning to making this decision to be regenerated. Don't we? Aren't we tired of bumping our heads in selfishness, in pride, in egotism? Of course we are. And he says here, you are wary of illusions, and so you consult reality and strive to magnify it. And reality has accepted your decision for its implementation in the world. But do not forget that the collaborators in Christ's work only help without having expectations, and work without attachment to results. Pause. We were talking about spiritist centers. Nowadays, more people than ever need it. We need to make it available. And we can't do things expecting results. We need to do because we need to do it. We need to keep this message alive because it's important for everybody, without expecting that people change themselves, because our focus is solely on being dutiful and sharing. Because sharing is really caring. Not only for kids, for adults. And he's saying this to the whole crowd, saying, like a candle's wick, which must be consumed to dissipate the darkness, you will be compelled to undergo suffering and humiliation so that new horizons may be opened up to people's understanding. And he reminds us of Paul of Tarsus. When Paul said in his writings, we are hard pressed, but not crushed, perplexed, but not despairing, persecuted, but not forsaken, smitten, but not destroyed. Wherever we go, we bear the marks of the Lord Jesus in our bodies, so that divine life may be manifested in the world. Thus, whoever is reborn into this shadow of dense matter will continuously be handed over to sacrifice for the love of truth, so that the Divine Master's lesson may shine more brightly in the realms of mortal flesh. He spoke for more minutes, and when they ended the conversation, his talk, he embraced a few people, and then he saw a man. He saw a man named Varus, Quintus Varus. He exclaimed, embracing him, saying, "Varus, you're here." Who is Varus? The main character of this book. Varus. He was an old Roman with penetrating, sad gaze, whose white tunic, when compared with the bright clothing of his friend, looked like a fading patch of fog when it meets the sudden light of dawn. Friend, imagine where Quintus Varus is right now in his evolution. If he was already enlightened, all these spirits connected to the earth, we're not alone. You see, friends, we're not alone. We have so much spiritual help. Today, our dear Daisy Gallen was reading a passage by Emmanuel that talked about this in our daily prayers at Cardiac Radio. And I'm sharing this with you because when we read this, we're talking about spirits who are still connected to our evolution on earth. And they embraced each other. Quintus Varus, kind and sorrowful, explained to Claudius that he planned to go back to reincarnating. Interesting. Claudius, the very speaker, turns to Quintus Varus and asks, "But why? I know about your service record. Imagine the stature of this spirit nowadays, Quintus Varus. If in the 2nd century he was already like this, imagine now. I know about your service record not only for the cause of the order, but, and in the patrician world, your last pilgrimage was that of an honest man right up to the ultimate sacrifice, and your first attempts at Christian growth were some of the worthiest I've ever seen. Mightn't continuing your evolution on the unsettling escapes of the flesh be inadvisable?" Think about it. The very speaker who was just talking about sacrifices, he turns to his friend Varus and says, "But Varus, haven't you sacrificed enough?" What a question. Huh? Is there a limit to the sacrifices of love? Quintus Varus made a silent gesture of supplication and said, and remember, Claudius is above in terms of moral stature than Quintus Varus. Because Varus is now going to say, "Claudius, my dear friend, I beg you. I know that you have the power to authorize my return. Yes, of course, the appeals from higher spheres have touched my soul. I long to be reunited finally with those who have gone before me. However," now prepare your tissue paper here. "However," and his voice nearly faded away with emotion, "of those who stayed behind, I have a beloved son who is lost in darkness. I would like to rescue him." Tassianius, the other asked, intrigued. "Exactly." And Varus continued with charming humility, "I dream about leading him to Christ with my own hands. I have begged the Lord for such a gift with all the fervor of my fatherly love. Tassianius is to me what the rose is to the thorny bush from which I sprang, In my indigence, he is my treasure. In my ugliness, he is the beauty I have longed for to make me proud. I would give anything to devote myself to him again, to hold him close to me, to guide his steps to Jesus. That is the heaven I aspire to. Pause. This is so surreal that it's like, pinch me, I can't believe it. How many people have this type of love for you and you don't realize it? Think about it. People who love you, spirits more advanced, who give their life to you. And maybe you also reincarnated to do what Quintus Varus did to Tashianis, to bring him to the Christ, to this universal consciousness without which we don't evolve. On earth, we're subjected to the governance of the Christ. So, life is deeper than the eyes can see. We're here now, in this very moment, reflecting very deeply about our lives. Those who came before us to make this reincarnation possible, who have asked the highest forces to bring us back to track. And how many times have we asked to reincarnate and sacrifice ourselves to bring loved ones back to Christ Jesus, or finally surrendered? You want to know more? Me too. Yes, Sol Souza, he wants to return to help Tashianis. So then he asks Claudio, who is above him in terms of evolution. He is the person who needs to authorize his journey back to reincarnation. You think people reincarnate just like that? So before we trash this life out, before we think we were born in the wrong family, before we think our children are not our children, say no. I ask for it. So then Quintus Varus asked, might I be wrong in my aspiration? The old guide patted him on the shoulder, openly showing his commiseration. He passed his hand around his light-bathed forehead and replied, I cannot argue with your sentiments, which I must respect. But would such self-sacrifice be worth it? And now what is the answer? The answer of this person who loves Tashianis. He says, I don't think. And he says about Tashianis, forgive me, Claudio, the very guide, I don't think Tashianis is ready. I saw him a few days ago in the temple of Vesta, leading a large legion of the enemies of the light. Whoa. You're talking about a person, Quintus Varus, who is already surrendered to the governance of the earth, and he wants to help rescue a beloved one who is pretty much an obsessor, who is pretty much somebody who is leading the dark forces. Whoa. He didn't seem at all inclined for any work having to do with the gospel. He wanders around in the sanctuaries of the Olympic deities, inciting riots against fledgling Christianity, also he still revels in the delights of the circus, where he finds stimulation and pleasure in the bloodshed. I too have been observing my son, says Quintus Varus, in that unfortunate state of affairs. Quintus Varus says sadly, but, now this is the turning point. Quintus Varus is not giving a silly step. He studied his son. I've noticed recently that he is grieved and distressed. Who knows? He might be on the verge of a major breakthrough. I understand that he has been recalcitrant in his evil ways and has continued to devote himself to lower sensations that keep him from seeing the higher horizons of life. But I have concluded that we must do something when we see a need for the rehabilitation of those we love. Pause. Quintus Varus observed that his son Tatianus is grieved and distressed. This is just like Saul of Tarsus. Before Jesus coming and appearing to him in the Damascus road, he was just like that, grieved, distressed. He was conflicted, like humanity nowadays. Humanity nowadays, at this time of the coronavirus, is more than ever in distress and grieved. They look back at the lives that they have been having. They like parts of it, but they dislike parts of it. At the same time, this is what we call in psychology emotional conflict, which is the best state to make a breakthrough, to shift. People talk about shifts in life when we turn things around. This 180, when we go to a different direction. How does it happen? Everything is organic. It begins when we become permeable to the light. We doubt that the darkness is the place to stay. We doubt our ignorant ways of being and living. That was Tatianus. Well, will he be authorized to come back? So Claudius remained silent and thoughtful. And the loving father, Quintus Varus, reiterated, "Selfless friend, let me go back." And Claudius says, "But are you aware of the risks? One can save a drowning man without exposing himself to the fury of waves. To help Tatianus, you will be exposed to all the dangers that he himself is exposed to." And then Varus replied, determined, "I know that. For the sake of our friendship, help me. I will endeavor to serve the gospel with all my strength. I will accept every sacrifice. I will eat the bread of gall, soaked in sweat and tears. Still, I beg your permission to let me use every means possible to call my son to the work of Christ. Of course, the path will be strewn by obstacles. Even so, with the Lord's help and the help of friends, I'm sure to emerge victorious." Sincerely moved, Claudius asked, the venerable mentor asked Quintus Varus, "How much time do you think you need?" "You would leave that up," and then he replies, "I would leave that up to you." So then the benevolent friend Claudius says, "Very well then, I can confidently endorse your decision. I'll give you 20 lostrums, meaning lostrums 5 years, 20 times 5, a century. I think 1 century should be enough. We will take measures so you'll be sustained in your covering, new covering of flesh. Your work for the cause of the gospel will be credited to you in the higher realms. As for Tashiania's merit or demerit as a result of your renunciation, I'll let that be a private matter of your responsibility. Pause. What is that? A commitment of 100 years to rescue a soul? Who are the spirits who have that loving commitment towards us, friends? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about the people like Quintus Varus who have asked permission to sacrifice their journey to rescue us? Who are they? Where are they? Can you recognize some of them? Some might be or might have been reincarnated with you. Others are still connected to you in the afterlife. Who are they? Do we recognize them? And what about ourselves? Have we also in our own turn, step towards giving a hand to those whom we love dearly and recognize that they need help? Life is so beautiful. The purpose of life is beyond what we can imagine, right? This story of Hail Christ is the story of love. Of love. And that's why at the beginning of the preface, Emmanuel says that Christ needs human cooperation. Quintus Varus is offering his own life to help Tashianius. And he's going to help many more. Not only one, but many more. We're reincarnated, friends, we could say, thanks to the love of souls who are more advanced than us, whom in the name of God, for the love of Christ, have asked and intervened for us, asked for our helping us, intervening for our own sake. In the next 24 hours, let us meditate on this and express our gratitude to the many souls who have loved us immensely, sacrificed their lives, their evolution, to being with us, sometimes so silently we don't recognize. You will see in Tashiania's journey that he only recognized much later. What matters is that we feel the love that surrounds us. In the next 24 hours, let us be deeply grateful and deeply reflective of these souls who are incarnated or the spirits who are discarnated and are deeply committed to our evolution. Let us connect with them through our gratitude, because certainly we're not reincarnated just because. Jesus is doing his work thanks to the human cooperation of those who are more evolved than us, who planned this reincarnation. And it's beyond just our guardian angels, who are the most phenomenal of them all. But it's about all these other ones who teamed up to bring us to another level. Tashianius is not reincarnating with a father who loves him. There's a team a network of beloved friends, of people who love him, who are there to support his evolution. And he says here to Quintus Varus, your work for the cause of the gospel will be credited to you. Remember that we can stay in touch through prayer, even under the heavy veil of forgetfulness in your physical struggle. We will hear your prayers and support you with our assistance. Go in peace whenever you wish, and may Jesus bless you. Remember, we can stay in touch through prayer. Friends, through prayer, we can connect with those who stay there. Right, Daisy Gallant? This is so beautiful. This is so phenomenal. Emmanuel, thank you for disclosing this to us. This story is being told as true story to remind us of our very stories. We are here reincarnated thanks to the sacrifice of so many we don't even recognize. In the next 24 hours, it's our turn. We need to reflect. The good spirits are asking us to be grateful, to rejoice in feeling how much we're loved, how many sacrificed for us. Let us just feel it and express our immense gratitude and pray, because they've been longing for this, that we consciously communicate with them. No matter the forgetfulness of those moments before our reincarnation, at this time on earth, more than ever we need gratitude. The gratitude that will shift our vibrations and connect us with the higher realms. We're on earth for sacred purposes. Not only Tashianis has the privilege of being loved, of being guided, rescued, all of us. And we in our turn, if we were not already volunteering for it, one day we will. Step forward into this self-sacrifice to rescue loved ones that have been left behind. What a book. A book that talks about our own redemption and the love that catapults us. Friends, we have only reasons to rejoice, only reasons to keep on marching forward without stopping and multiplying the joy of living, feeling the embrace of those who love us dearly and never abandon us. And when life challenges us, with whatever it is, let's not forget, they know what we need. They allow it because we need those experiences. Let us hold tightly their hands and stay there feeling the love, the most sublime love that life does not break. We raise our thoughts to Jesus, thanking him for not minding our thoughtlessness, our rebelliousness. On the contrary, for always awaiting with his love for our open hearts, awaiting our open hearts, waiting for our open hearts, for our own pathway of sacrifice, the sacrifice of the ego. Hail Christ. As Emmanuel says, let us wrap up this chapter today. I know we want more tomorrow. He finalizes the preface by saying, Hail Christ, to those who aspire the glory of serving. In your name glorify and salute you. Thank you, friends. Thank you, beloved friends, for being here today and for this beautiful exercise of gratitude for those who came before us. Thank you, John the Rosa, Sunshine, Sol Souza, so many of you who are here, and I cannot see all of your names. A big hug to you, and spread the joy and the gratitude, for you are loved. We are so loved, and so shall we love in return. A kiss and a very caring hug. And until tomorrow, God willing, with one more chapter of Hail Christ here at Cardiac Radio, always nourishing our souls.